Hello, and welcome to Stream of Conscience, brought to you by Democracy for America, Fairfield County. I'm your host, John Hartwell. Our guest today is Matt Miklave, Democratic candidate for Norwalk Common Council from District A. Matt served on the council from 2001 to 2007, where he was the chair of the Planning Committee and briefly council president. He lost his election bid in 2007 by 10 votes. He's lived in Norwalk for 20 years, has 3 children who have gone to public schools, and works as a labor lawyer in Stamford. Well, Matt, welcome to Stream of Conscience.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Matt, recently you wrote a letter to the editor talking about the need in Norwalk for the right development at the right cost. What led you to write that letter, and what do you mean by the right development?
Well, when I was on the council between 2001 and 2007, we spent a great deal of our time developing the 3 development projects in Norwalk, 95-7, Waypoint, and POCO. We spent a great deal of time thinking about, along with the administration and the redevelopment agency, how those 3 projects worked together. In 2009, in an effort to try to jumpstart the development, the Norwalk Common Council, as a result of a consultant study, decided that they wanted to change the structure and the shape of the development project in order to try to get something done quicker. And it's my belief that the plan that we adopted in 2005, 6, and 7, that's a good plan that will secure Norwalk's economic future by establishing an economic base that we can build jobs for the 21st century.
So what kind of base are we talking about? Because plans like this usually involve a mix of retail and commercial and perhaps hotels and things that will attract people to come in. What in your mind is the right mix that will actually promote long-term development?
Well, I think the tripartite plans of the original 95-7, Waypoint, and POCO, I thought that was a good mix. You look at 95-7, that's one of the last downtown Class A office space complexes that we have in our city. Class A office space isn't just better tax rate space. It is. It's much better than retail space. But it's also that space that we need to promote knowledge-based jobs, high-wage, long-term, long economic development jobs. We didn't have to spend 20 years and millions of dollars to build a strip mall or to build high-end housing. So I was concerned when we started talking about reducing the amount of Class A office space at 95-7 and increasing the amount of retail space that we were missing the ball. We don't need to do something immediately. Surely that would be great if we could, but we need to secure Norwalk's long-term economic interests. And by building over retail, over housing, we lose out on the gem that is Norwalk and what Norwalk could be.
So what are the natural competitive advantages of Norwalk that you'd like to develop further?
Oh, the list is endless. We have a working harbor. We have the intersection of highway, rail, and river at the same place. If you look at economic development in this area, we're one of the first New England town greens you reach as you come out of New York City. Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful composite background. In addition, we have an incredibly diverse and rich community. We celebrate our history, we celebrate our diversity. These are unique attributes that are unique to Norwalk. If you look at major cities across the United States, San Francisco with a large commercial tourist population, or New Orleans, for example, all of them take advantage of their natural wonders, and that's what we need to do in Norwalk as well. Really bring all of those together to promote smart economic development, but economic development that is harmonized and consistent.
And when you talk about knowledge workers, what industries do you think that they would be working in?
Well, we're looking, knowledge-based jobs for the 21st century are going to be graphic designers, computer technologies, doctors, lawyers, accountants, those jobs that are uniquely, candidly, American jobs. I think we can't really expect manufacturing to come back to Norwalk, so we have to look to the next the 21st century equivalent of manufacturing. And the United States leads the world in information technology development. And that's something that we need to remember, and that's something that we need to promote.
And it seems to me that Norwalk Community College is perfectly positioned here to contribute to that growth. They have great programs in computers and in television production and in graphic arts and nursing and all kinds of things that I think can help grow the economy.
Absolutely. If we really are investing in a true partnership, public-private partnerships between our educators, our business community, and our civic leadership, we really could set a standard by which all others could be judged. I'm tired of having Norwalk considered to be the hole in the donut of Fairfield County. In my belief, we can become the leader, not only of Fairfield County and all of Connecticut, but the leader of New England about what we can do. And we are situated well to do that. But that means we can't settle for less. We can't settle for just any development. We need the right development. There hasn't been enough conversation about job creation, the kinds of jobs that we are creating as a result of these economic development projects, and what kind of jobs we're creating for our kids and our kids' kids. That's the kind of discussion we need to have.
So what can you do on the council? If you were to get back on the council again, you put in a plan, they've changed the plan somewhat, it seems, since that time, different council, different mayor, but you'd like to be back on the council. Let's assume you're there and you're back in the planning position that you had before. What can you actually do from the council to make your vision a reality?
That's a great question. No one person can lead the city of Norwalk. No one person can have that kind of an impact. I would be one of 15 people. I wasn't solely responsible for the economic plan that we have right now, but I was part of a team that worked together. And by being vocal and being an advocate and taking every opportunity to talk about jobs for the 21st century, I believe people will start that conversation or renew that conversation, a conversation that we had when I left office. And I will tell you, I don't think this is a Republican idea. I don't think it's a Democrat idea. I just think it's a good idea to start that conversation. There are certainly men and women on both sides of the aisle who believe that the future of Norwalk is in our hands and the possibilities are endless. What we need to do is harness that passion, harness that vision, and bring us back together in common ground so that we can move forward together as a community. I believe that's possible.
And who else are you working with to make this possible?
Well, when I was on the council, I would work with the Republicans and the Democrats, the redevelopment agency, and the mayor's office, both Mayor Knopp's office and Mayor Moshe's office. I don't see myself as being a one side or the other. What I want to do is try to find common ground. I was told a long time ago, and I try to remember it as often as I can, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. There's a lesson there.
So tell me about public education and how all that fits in the general scheme of things.
I'm a big supporter of public education. I myself am a product of public education and public schools, and I think that we have to invest in our school system. I think too often in Norwalk, we find ourselves in an us versus them situation. The Board of Education on one side, the Common Council and the Mayor's office on another. I'd like us to try to work together to break through that. Clearly we have to work to try to bridge the achievement gap between poor and wealthy. There is no question in my mind that information technology, information access is the revolution of our generation, and we need to make sure that all our kids have access to that education by bringing together and ending the achievement gap. There's been a lot of work in that regard. But more than that, we have to make sure that our schools are making our kids able to compete in the 21st century. And I would like to see an emphasis on a minimum level of literacy in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Those are the knowledge-based jobs for the 21st century. I'd like to see every kid graduating from Norwalk schools to have a minimum level of STEM education, a minimum level of literacy. I'd like to reward teachers who go back to school to make sure they have STEM certifications and to make sure those teachers who are most capable are able to bring that passion for science, technology, engineering, and math to all the disciplines of the school system, whether it's art, whether it's biology, or whether it's good old-fashioned geography or spelling. Information technology will lead this generation forever.
That sounds actually more like a job for the Board of Ed than for the Common Council.
I think this is too big a job for one group of people. I think it's incumbent upon all of us, the city, the Board of Education, community leaders, businesses, civic leaders, to all work together with a common goal. We have to get away from the us versus them fight over budget dollars. We have to find common ground.
So you mentioned budget, and obviously money is tight, and it's probably going to be that way. I mean, property values have fallen, and incomes have fallen as people have lost jobs and have gone, into unemployment. So, there's not going to be a lot of money coming into the coffers in the near future. So, what do you do? What's a budget process that you think will work in this environment of constrained resources?
We tend to budget backwards in Norwalk, and this isn't a Republican problem or a Democrat problem, it's just a problem the way we budget. We generally take last year's budget and figure out what we're going to cut from that. And by doing that, we focus on the cuts, not the keeps. We focus our attention on the 10% of the budget that we're getting rid of and not the 90% of the budget we're keeping. I'd like us to talk about reversing that. I'd like us to talk about the 90% of the keeps and making sure we're providing those services and their programs better than we've provided them before. And we can do that if we have regular, rigorous reviews of programs to make sure that they are producing the results we need to produce.
We hear a lot these days, especially from the Tea Party side of the Republican Party, saying that we have way more government than we need, that we've taxed ourselves to death, that we're stopping innovation, and that job creators have uncertainty here. I mean, how does this work at the local level? What should someone expect as a taxpayer and a citizen in Norwalk? What should they expect to give to this town, and what should they expect to get back?
I think there needs to be a reasonable level of predictability about taxes. Let's just take a look at Norwalk. We raise over $250 million a year. We're a $250 million business. That's where I come from. That's big money. We have to raise that money appropriately and spend it wisely. Quite frankly, we have so many problems in our communities. We could raise twice that amount of money and still not tackle everything we need to do. So what we need to do is set an appropriate level of spending, an appropriate level of taxes, based on a common shared agreement about how to do that, and then set our priorities and understand how much we're going to spend for our priorities, and this is the key, set reasonable performance standards so we know whether our programs are being successful. Just one example I'd like to use is road paving. We spend $4 to $5 million a year on road paving, and we've done that every year for the last 10 years. Is there anyone in Norwalk who thinks we're doing a good job in the way we pave our roads? I don't think so. I think people may compare us to other communities and say we're doing better than them, but are we getting what we pay for when we spend consistently $4 million a year? And if the answer is no, then maybe we should think about how we bid those contracts out. Maybe we should be thinking about a better way to pave our roads and to spend that money. And that's just one example. Community policing, school for educational opportunities. We need to think about getting the bigger bang for the buck. And we can do that by enlisting common goals and a rigorous review of performance based on what we have previously defined is success or not.
And who would carry out this review? Because it sounds to me like that's also something that might be done somewhere else, perhaps in the mayor's office. It sounds like an executive function to assess the viability and the efficiency of a particular program and to make recommendations?
Well, I think it's a shared responsibility, quite frankly. In Norwalk, we have a weak mayor and a strong council system.
Okay.
We have council committees that oversee various departments, and the committees tend to be structured to go along with the department. Public health and safety, for example, fire and police. Well, they don't play very much of a role in the budget process, and I'd like to see the Common Council become more involved with defining what the department's priorities are, trying to implement them, and more than importantly, measuring whether those programs are successful or not. At the end of the day, the mayor has a critical role in that function, and that person has to step up to the plate and be part of the process as well. I don't think there's a lack of willingness on the part of the parties to do this. I think there's a lack of vision about how to go about doing that. And that's something that I hope to advocate for if I'm returned back to the Common Council.
Now, an individual who approaches government for a service can find themselves going from one office to another, looking for whoever it is that's in charge. Takes a lot of time, a lot of energy. It seems pretty wasteful. It seems to me that we have a government that's stuck almost in the 19th century where you have to turn up at the desk and talk to somebody as opposed to one in the 21st century that uses technology. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're absolutely right. When I talk to developers, when I talk to people that are trying to do business with the city of Norwalk, they compare Norwalk unfavorably to, believe it or not, the city of New York. The city of New York, which has a streamlined planning process. You may, in New York, have to go to a couple of meetings, but it's not more than 2 or 3. Everybody has a say into the development process. And remember, New York has historic preservation issues, it has rent control, it has fire and safety concerns, and yet they seem to be able to do economic development projects a lot faster than Norwalk can. We have to come back and figure out how we can streamline our development process. But more important, I believe that we should have a one-stop shopping place in Norwalk. There should be an officer, and I would suggest that it's either in the redevelopment agency or it's in the mayor's office where we already have an economic development team, that person or that office be responsible for helping people looking to go through the process of doing business in Norwalk, relocating to Norwalk, attaining licenses in Norwalk, to help them go through that development process, help them go through that approval process, so we're not lost in the massive bureaucracy. And so that the offices that have a say and the departments that have an absolute legitimate role in determining appropriate restrictions and zoning all have their appropriate say, but do it quickly because time is money. We need economic development in our city, and we have too much red tape that gets in the way.
Now, I didn't mention in my introduction, but you are, I did mention you're a labor lawyer. You went to Notre Dame to go to law school, and you've been practicing labor law now for a long time. What about that experience can you bring to the Common Council?
Well, I think my experience as a lawyer has taught me I'm a pretty good advocate, and I would try to use my position on the Common Council to advocate for the things that I believe in. That we need to build a better community by building better economic development projects. That we need to build better budgets and make our city more accessible and more accountable. And that we need to build better schools by focusing on closing the achievement gap and making sure every child is STEM literate, science, technology, engineering, and math literate.
But around the country, what we're seeing is that a lot of governments are beginning to beat up on the unions that employ the people who work for the town. We see teachers under fire, we see police and first responders, pensions being beaten up. We see here in Connecticut, the governor just drove a very hard deal with the unions to give up $1.6 billion worth of benefits over 2 years from the workforce, which was a huge, huge give back. Is there anything like that on the horizon in Norwalk?
Well, I'm not sure what the status of the contract negotiations are right now. One of the things that tends to happen in Norwalk is that contract negotiations are held very close to the vest in the mayor's office, and that tends not to be shared with the Common Council. That's a position that I've disagreed with throughout my tenure on the Common Council, both under the Knopp administration and under the Moshe administration. I believe that the negotiation process should be more open than it is. But at the same time, I think we have to recognize that the people who know where the problems are in our city, the people who know best how to make these programs work, those are the people we employ. They're our best resource to harness their knowledge and their power in order to make a difference. And I believe that we have to find a way to partner with organized labor and to partner with our city employees in order to share in the benefits of economic savings. And so I would propose things such as gain sharing, where dollar savings from budget savings that are initiated by employees or by departments are shared not only with the general coffers of the city, but also with the employees that have brought those concerns to us, that have found the way to save the money. If you want to know how to plow the streets, talk to the guy that drives the snowplow. If you want to know how to pick up trash, talk to the guy who does that. If you want to know how to police our streets and make our streets safer, talk to the cops on the beat. That's where we will make a better city, by harnessing their knowledge and their power. Too often what happens is government is set up as an impediment to this kind of innovation. We need to get rid of those impediments and harness that knowledge.
I guess the government around most closely associated with innovation in this part of the world has been Mayor Bloomberg in New York, with a lot of the things that he's put in with community policing that they've really improved upon, with the 411 system to get information, or I'm sorry, 311 system.
Right.
Well, are any of these things being used in Norwalk today, and if not, what could be brought in?
Well, one of the things that they did in New York City was they developed a system for crime fighting called CopStat, and it was a data-driven analysis system to try to find out where the crime was and to focus resources on that. That's part of the rigorous, regular review I talked about. What they did in Baltimore under Martin O'Malley, who is now governor of Maryland, they took CopStat and they turned it into CityStat, and they began a program of systematic, regular reviews of all programs across the line to assess performance. The success of Baltimore's CityStat program has been replicated in 11 cities across the United States, including cities about the size of Norwalk, Warren, Michigan, for example, and Springfield, Massachusetts, to amazing success. The key to the program is to hold department heads accountable for results and making sure there's the constant review and making sure there is performance. And if there's not performance, to find ways to improve performance in real time. Not 2 or 3 years out, but 2 or 3 weeks out. That's the kind of rigorous analysis we need to bring to our city. And I would hope that the mayor's office, whoever's mayor, whether it's Andy Garfunkel or Dick Moshe, would start to adopt some of these same tactics, because they're very effective, they're not expensive, it costs a little bit of software and maybe an Excel spreadsheet once in a while. It's not hard to do. We just have to have the will and the vision to do it.
Well, Matt, it sounds really exciting. Economic development is clearly the key to the future, but there's a lot that can be done. This just takes a little bit of work and a little bit of imagination, and it sounds like you're on top of all of that. So thanks very much for coming in today, and good luck in the election.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure being here.
And now, a Stream of Conscience commentary with Kate Tepper.
Just over 160 years ago, a small group of women sat down to afternoon tea in Seneca Falls, New York. It was a tea party that changed history by taking the first steps in the long struggle for women's suffrage and equality in the United States. It was a tea party that would put the antisocial agenda of the current Tea Party insurgency to shame. Among the attendees at that long-ago tea party were Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, who were already heavily involved in the anti-slavery movement. As they spoke, it dawned on these well-educated upper-class women that they themselves were regarded as inferior to men and were politically hardly better off than the slaves they were trying to help. The law discriminated against women so pervasively that they had almost none of the rights that men enjoyed. Incensed at this injustice, the women hastily organized what they termed a women's convention Despite the short notice and lack of modern communication, hundreds of women and several men attended the convention a few days later. Katie Stanton, who had insisted that the words "to obey" be removed from her wedding vows, wrote a document based on the Declaration of Independence, which she termed a Declaration of Sentiments. The document declared that men and women are created equal and deserved equal rights, including the right to vote, a radical idea back then. Those early proponents of votes for women were called the Shrieking Sisterhood and accused of everything, from immorality and drunkenness to prostitution. Gangs of hyped-up street bullies formed by educated men would disrupt the suffragist speeches with abusive language and often physical attack. Right here in Norwalk, we had our own suffragist heroine. Her name was Helena Hill Weed, and because of her and thousands of courageous women like her, women not only have the right to vote, they have the right to represent both women and men in our governments. In 1917, hundreds of women stood outside the Woodrow Wilson White House 24 hours a day for months on end, demanding votes for women, and because they campaigned fearlessly against this great injustice, they were thrown in prison, brutally beaten, put in stress positions, and force-fed. Helena was one of the women jailed and beaten up in Washington, D.C. simply for demanding an equal right to participate fully in the political life of her country. It took the dedication and courage of women like Helena Weed nearly 75 years to gain voting rights. Believe me, it wasn't the so-called conservatives that brought about this change. It was those reviled, bleeding heart, progressive, liberal, gutsy women and men who fought with their brains and their bodies for women's equality. I honor the memory of these fearless fighters for my freedom every time I vote, and urge every other woman to pay our courageous foremothers the same respect by voting in every election, municipal, state, or federal. No excuses, vote. This has been a Stream of Conscience commentary. I'm Kate Tepper. Thanks for watching.
That's our show for this week. We hope you enjoyed it. If you live in the town served by Cablevision from Norwalk, you can catch our show every Wednesday on Channel 88. If you're interested in learning more about progressive political action in Fairfield County, please check out our Democracy for America group. We meet the first Wednesday of the month, 7 to 9 p.m. at the Silver Star Diner in Norwalk. We always welcome new members. Remember, change is possible, and you can make it happen. This has been Stream of Conscience, and I'm your host, John Hartwell. We hope to see you again soon.